Okay, we are here again for Perspective on Athletics, and today we have Dean Snider with us. Dean is the Director of Athletics at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. Dean, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us.
Thanks, Mark. It's a pleasure to join you in this and looking forward to it.
Well, it's going to be a great conversation. I know Whitman has many unique qualities, one of the best academic institutions anywhere. The athletic program has been on a great trajectory with lots of success in recent years under your leadership, and we want to talk about that as we get into our conversation. But before we do that, to help people understand a little bit more about you and your background, can you give us kind of a brief sketch of your athletic stops and how you ended up in the position you're in today at Whitman?
Sure. I was a lover of sport my whole life. Played volleyball, basketball all through high school. Had to make a choice in college. Chose volleyball in Canada, just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. Lucky I did. I probably wouldn't have been able to make a career out of basketball, but did my graduate work. Well, first of all, I started coaching at my alma mater, Trinity Western University, and led that program to its first ever national appearance, and I guess we finished fifth in the nation in that year. And after that, moved on to Western Washington University, where I was the head coach there for 4 years while I was doing my graduate work. And that was a great experience, a great school, strong academic school. That was my first introduction to American sport, and thoroughly enjoyed it there. And when my time was there done, time there was complete, I was looking for what was next, and Whitman College was looking for a volleyball coach, and they knew of me because I had competed with our Western teams here, and we were able to find our way here for the head volleyball coach position. Did that here for 11 years. In the last 2 years I had also taken on the role of athletic director.
Wow.
And I've been athletic directing now since, I think it's 2005.
Wow. Well, interesting that you have that Canadian background, and you mentioned you had your first introduction to American sport. And the sport was the same, but were there some differences that were obvious to you when you came to Western Washington?
I think some cultural differences for sure. Just the passion and the interest that the culture took in sport, and the investment that institutions and the communities put into their sport, the way families followed their kids in sport, is just at a higher level of interest, I think. I think Canadian sports kind of catching up in that area, but during the years that I was growing up, it was not quite the same.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting, and hadn't heard that before. And so you ended up at Whitman, and you're coaching volleyball there, and you end up in this athletic director role, and you're doing both jobs at one point. But is being an athletic director something you had originally aspired to? A lot of people come from the coaching ranks and move into the athletic director's chair, but is that something that you had always thought was going to be your ultimate job?
I don't think I was targeting an athletic director's job as a role. I think I was, the concept of leadership has always been an important one to me. I grew up under a university president in Canada. My father was an institutional president, and the idea of leadership has always just been there. And the bigger picture has always been something I've been made aware of and just been drawn to. And so, I loved my coaching career, and I was doing that and throwing myself into my program and the students in my program. But as I could see that potentially coming to an end, it was at that point that I kind of looked towards administration, and not really from the start.
Yeah, interesting. And I want to ask you about I think it was a 2-year stint where you were still the head volleyball coach and filling the athletic director's chair. Not real common these days. What was that like as an experience?
Well, overwhelming, I suppose, is a fair word. I did that for 2 years and had to kind of make a decision. I could continue to do that, or I could stay married. And I think I made the better choice.
Well said. I think that's very true. It's tough enough to be a head coach or an athletic director, but to do both, it's almost impossible, I think.
Right.
So So you're ending up at Whitman College here, and I think coaching there has some interesting challenges. Certainly, being the athletic director can as well. And for those that may not know a lot about Whitman, top tier liberal arts institution, one of the top institutions anywhere, very high academic profile, highly selective institution, and not a lot of athletic history with a lot of success. But that has been changing. And it's interesting. And not only do you have the academic profile and a lack of tradition per se, but Walla Walla, Washington is really remote. I mean, it's a rural setting. It's not really close to anything. And I would imagine that there can be some recruiting challenges. So what I wanted you to kind of talk about is how are you getting this done? I mean, you have some challenges to recruit and find the right, not only student athletes, but also coaches. So how have you been going about that? What is the strategy there? Or how do you overcome what some might see as real obstacles to building an athletic program?
Well, I think that the things that you've described as obstacles, so the high academic standing of the institution, the selectivity institution, Walla Walla, and its location, also happen to be some of our greatest strengths and our opportunities. I think it's a matter of how you look at the opportunity as opposed to the situation itself. I think our biggest challenge was neither of those things, actually. I think our biggest challenge was our own attitude as an institution about excellence in athletics. I think there was a little bit of stereotyping of that you can't do great athletics with really smart kids. I think there was a general thought of that, and that's a stereotype that exists out there, and I frankly just reject that. I actually welcome the top academic institution. If you look in Division I schools, for instance, Stanford, pretty good athletically, right? Bring it back down to Division III, where we are consistently top three schools athletically in Division III. Williams College, Amherst, Middlebury, pretty darn good academic institutions. So I think that the change that really took place was more internal here, just saying a kind of a belief that we can, and in fact we should be excellent athletically at Whitman College, just like Whitman College is excellent at everything else.
So how did that transpire? Obviously, I think that makes a lot of sense, but that's easier said than done sometimes when you're talking about changing culture and a campus culture, perhaps, or a campus attitude towards athletics. How did that play out? How did you go about that and starting to make some change?
Well, I think it was completely a collaborative effort. Certainly wasn't just me in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I think I hit this role at a fortuitous opportunity. Essentially, in the year that I came in as athletic director, I was asked to serve as interim athletic director by our then first-year president, George Bridges, and he simply had this thought that if you're going to do athletics, we should really do it right. And then he simply asked, what does that mean? How do you do it right? And we had some thoughts about that. And we had some conversations, and we determined that we should be trying to be excellent in our athletic programs like every other program at Whitman College, so that our students would have as excellent an experience in their program as our Whitman College students were having in other programs. And that was simply the start of the idea. It wasn't that we needed to be good at athletics. It was that our students needed to have the same really great experience that they were having in our athletic programs that they were having elsewhere across our campus.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, and that's very logical when you break it down and put it in those terms. So there's one aspect of finding the right students and getting them to Walla Walla. Speak for a moment about maybe the opportunities out there to bring the right coaches to that type of place. The coaches need to understand the recruiting profile. They need to understand what their lives might be like living in Walla Walla. So there might be some opportunities that you've addressed in those areas too. And I know you've brought in some fantastic coaches. You've had a lot of success. You've had coaches that have been there for a long time as well. Speak to that aspect of maybe running and building the program.
So coaching is critical. It's the first point, for a student's experience, right? It's an absolutely critical role, and bringing the right people here is really important. We need to find coaches who believe in teaching through sport, who believe in effective leadership and training opportunities through sport, and that's what we've gone about finding. And part of you see a trend across the country of where coaches 20, 30 years ago used to be members of the faculty. There's a trend away from that, and we've been really trying to buck that. And in fact, in the years that we've been here, we've brought all of our coaches onto the faculty side of our staffing here at the college. So all of our head coaches now are faculty at Whitman College. When by the time I took over as AD, we had only a handful of faculty coaches left. So that's been a real thrust of where we've been going philosophically. Our coaches are teachers; they're members of the faculty. So that's a concept that draws a certain type of coach here. Number one, and then an outstanding byproduct of that is that we're naturally colleagues with the rest of the faculty on our campus. And we build that relationship, and we are on the same team. We're philosophically tied to that same mission. I guess I would say this: how the first question that we asked ourselves was, how and why does our athletic program fit into the mission of the institution? And so I think that's a fair question, regardless of where you are. You're going to get different answers from institution to institution, location to location. But I think that's a really great place to start. At least it certainly was for us, because it solidified the concept that we're not running just a program in and of ourselves, our own program. We're running an educational program that serves the mission of the institution. And we're on the same, we're basically working towards the same end. And I think that has been key in our success, particularly with our faculty, but also with our administration and our board of trustees.
I think that is key. And I think very few people take the time to ask that question. And I think if you do ask it, like you say, you can actually come up with a pretty good answer for most every campus. And I think that's the starting point. I think that's a great piece of advice for people. Dean, as we're talking here clearly, and I know this about you, you have some very strong personal beliefs about how athletic fits into the whole learning environment. And you mentioned that coaches are teachers, and you said that with conviction. And speak to that a little bit more, because I think it's a perfect situation at Whitman to put that into play, and you've been able to do it. So you are at this academic institution that has embraced athletics. You've been the one that's helped orchestrate this culture shift. Speak to that a little bit more, because you have some passion and energy behind that topic.
Well, when I was still coaching, I think I was forced. I think this question was kind of forced upon me by a really great student. I was here at Whitman College. I think it was probably my second year here. I had already been a head coach for 8 years now at this point. And we had just lost a game. It was not a game that we would have liked to have lost or felt like it was okay to have lost. It was one we probably would have preferred to, every time you lose, you prefer to win. But this is one of those ones that you feel like you should have. And I was probably in that setting. My memory, has me throwing around some cliches. Play to win, win ugly if necessary. You got to have a winner's attitude, or I was probably throwing around these kind of cliches. And I had a student. Her name was Barb Ream. Barb was one of my first recruits here at Whitman College. She put up her hand and she said, "Coach, why is winning important?" And it was a fabulous question, a question which in my 8 years previously, no student had ever asked me. And I was And I just thought it was one of those things that it just should go. It goes without saying, winning's important. Um, in fact, it shouldn't go without saying. I think now, having thought about it, we have to think about why is winning important. And the questions, and I didn't have an answer at that moment. I said to this young woman, I said, I really have to think about this because a thoughtful question deserves a thoughtful answer, and I need to think about this for a little while. And so I said, let's wrap things up, head home, and we did that. And I thought about it, and as I thought about it, I thought, well, what is the value in winning? Is it simply, is there value to the student in that? Well, it's more fun, for sure. But we're engaged in an educational enterprise here. Is fun enough to say that it's that important, right? Is do we increase our value as persons through winning? No, I don't think so at all. I think that every human being has innate value that just because. And whether we win or whether we lose does not change that human value that we have. Is there some kind of financial gain out of this? And I thought, well, in some settings that's probably true. In our setting, it's, there's no professional volleyball for these young women after this experience. We cannot make that argument either. So these things are running through my mind, and I think to myself, well, what is the value? And then it came down to the question of, well, why are we doing this in the first place? That purpose question. Why are we doing an athletic program? And the answers to that are the learning that can take place, the opportunity for leadership, the collaboration of a team environment in a high performance, a teamwork in a high performance environment. If that's not the work world, I'm not sure what is these days. The development of perseverance habits, the concept of failure as not an end but a process towards success. The idea of goal setting and setting strategies and pursuing those goals. These are all concepts and things that we can really learn through the experience of an athletic program if we do it intentionally. So I started thinking, if that's what we want to do, how do we connect winning with that, with those purposes? And what I came to is, I guess, in a way, another fairly well-known cliche was, it's not really ultimately what happens. But it's the process of going through that what happens. But we don't really have access to those learning pieces, those educational pieces, whether they be goal setting and strategies, or working together as a team, or pursuing goals, unless we're trying to win. Because it's in the trying to win that you actually have that motivation to work towards something. If you're not trying to win, what does it matter if you're setting and following your goals and strategizing towards your goals? What does it matter if you get up and persevere? What does it matter, if your team works together well or not? If you're not trying to win, we don't actually have access to those lessons. Right. So it's the idea of the process of trying to win and letting ultimately what happens happen. Right. But as we're in the process trying to win, but intentionally going after those learning lessons. And I think that's where it came to me with through that experience with that student, that the value of what it is that we have to do and why we have to try, why we have to pursue excellence in the process of running an athletic program.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And what I want to transition to now, because you've sort of been touching upon this already at a couple different points, is the idea of leadership. And one of the things that I always ask our guests about is their thoughts about leadership, and maybe specifically related to athletics or leadership in general. But, from your perspective, what do you think leadership is about? What makes a good leader? What does effective leadership look like? Can you speak to the topic?
Sure. I actually believe leadership has changed a lot in the last 30 years. Our idea of leadership and what it means to be effective leadership. And I think it's changed probably because of the access we all have to information now. the strong single man, single woman leader that was, very hierarchical in its, in its orientation, um, really just doesn't really function any longer when everyone has access to the same information that that one leader has. And so leadership has really become, I think, because of information technology, has really become more of a collaboration, more of a flattened out um, uh, system where you really have to collaborate and lead as a part of a team, but not as kind of the hierarchical leader. And so, as I lead with coaches and our staff, for instance, our coaches need to feel like they are engaged and fully a part of what's going on, not just with their own program, but with the institution as a whole. So they really buy into that institution mission. So department and institution. And so that requires, me to listen, to work with, ask questions, and engage our coaches in some of the bigger issues. And I think that also helps them feel more connected to the institution, which I think is part of the reason we've had people here as long as we've had. They're committed to the mission and to the college as a whole. Really, I think it's, when it comes right down to it, leadership has become about relationships, building and establishing and strengthening strong relationships so that you can ask the tough questions, you can and survive them. You can push people in a direction that they may not feel, or guide people in a direction that they may not feel comfortable moving in, and help them do that and succeed. And for those people to feel like they're not being strung along, but in fact being guided and led in a direction that is healthy for them as a professional as well as for the institution. But it's all about the relationships. You have to have strong relationships to be able to move our whole group and each individual along.
Yeah, I think that those are great observations on the world today, and specifically as it relates to athletics. Dean, the last thing I always ask people about is advice for people looking either to break into the industry or advance their careers. And as you look at the country, there are literally hundreds of graduate programs in athletic administration, sport management, what have you. And the reality is there are far more graduates every year than there probably are jobs for these people to take. So everyone's looking for an advantage. Everyone's looking for some sort of edge that they can gain and help prepare themselves better to get in and get that job so they can be on their career. And I'm sure you have these types of conversations with students from time to time. What are your thoughts on that, or your advice to people looking to get into the athletics industry and advance their career?
First of all, I think, matching your goals with the type of athletic experience that you want to be engaged in, I think, is an important piece. So really thinking about athletics more than just about college or high school athletics, but specifically within the various different realms of those experiences. There's a lot of different models out there, and what is it that specifically you want? And I think then generally speaking, there's been two ways that people get to an athletic director seat. There's through coaching, right? And you move up through coaching, and then there's through business, the kind of more of a business side model. And I think there's really strong value in both. And I think if you're moving in from the business side, you need to learn what coaching is about from coaches and be open to hearing what coaches and that coaching experience is about. And if you're coming in from the coaching side, I think we've got, we may have that educational and coaching side experience, but we need to broaden out our experience on the business side a little bit. So whichever direction you're coming from, I think you need to look at the other side and learn some of that as well. Put yourselves in situations that that are outside of your comfort zone, outside of what you know and do really easily, and maybe could do blindfolded, but now you have to think about it and learn and put yourself in a tougher position. I think those are looking for those types of opportunities, I think, help you build a career.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. What about on the hiring front? You've hired people. You're responsible for hiring not only coaches, but administrative positions as well in the department. Are there things that you believe set people apart or distinguish people amongst a pool of, qualified applicants? Are there things that you look for or that you've seen from time to time that this really makes a difference when I'm looking to hire somebody?
Yeah, so when it's coaching, and if you're coming in from the coaching side, we're looking for people who have demonstrated success in where they are, and I think it's an important thing if you're a young coach looking at getting into coaching, that you look at the jobs and find out, will this job allow me to be successful? Because there are far more really great coaches out there than there are really great opportunities. And I think as you are coaching, you need to discern pretty closely what opportunities you're going to accept, because certain positions can end a career or make it very much more difficult to land another position, and you need to discern those pretty well. So I think that's. Does that answer your question? I think it does.
Yeah, it does. I think that's a great point for coaches, but also say you're hiring a sports information director and an assistant AD. Are there qualities or characteristics that you think stand out in the best candidates that you see?
Yeah, being able to articulate why, I think, is an important question. And again, that's a question I ask each of our applicants: is why are we doing this? Why do you do this? What do you gain, and what do you have to give, and that kind of thing. So being able to articulate well purpose and your own mission, personal mission, and why you've engaged in this this career, I think that's important. Skills, you got to have good skills, right? You've got to sharpen your skills, and if we're hiring a writer, you got to be a really great writer. You got to be able to write, and you got to be able to write quickly, and then there's also a sense in the athletic world. It's one where I think it's not your traditional 9 to 5 kind of work, right? You've got to be comfortable with a high intensity and long hours, and you have to also then be very good at, I think, managing your own breaks, because everything has to be sustainable. You have to be able to sustain it. You can't just work 24/7, but you have to be able. But for some stretches, you might. Yeah. So you have to be good at taking your own breaks and caring for your own needs as well. And otherwise, I don't think you can sustain a career in college athletics.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice, and hopefully people will understand and take that to heart. Like I say, there's always people out there looking for some way to know, how can I give myself an advantage when I want to get that first job. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. But Dean, we've come to the end of our time. And this has been a wonderful conversation. We learned a lot about Whitman and how you're running things there. I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule and being with us today.
It's been my pleasure, Mark. I hope I haven't been too long-winded for you.
No, that's a fear of a lot of athletic directors, I know, but it was just fine, and I appreciate your thoughts. This has been Perspective on Athletics. We've been visiting with Dean Snider, Director of Athletics at Whitman College.